Welcome to Talkin' SEC. Writer, photographer, and producer Phillip Jordan discusses the latest news and breaks down the biggest games with the best analysts around. Now, from Southeast Alabama, a state that knows its sports, here is Phillip Jordan.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Talking SEC. I'm your host, Phillip Jordan from Last Word on College Football and 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer, Dothan Woods Football. This is the Wednesday edition of Talking SEC, Tuesday night if you're checking it out on the YouTube channel. On today's show, I will be joined by Last Word on College Football colleague Brandon Eisenman. We will be breaking down and discussing the first college football playoff ranking of the season. Who came number one? We will talk about that, especially 1 through 10. We have some SEC teams all over the top 10. We'll also look at the Alabama-LSU matchup this weekend, and we'll go around the SEC with some of the biggest news in the conference. You can check out Talking SEC on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. It means a lot to the show if you do that. If you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also watch the show over on YouTube, either at the Phillip Jordan YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and leave a comment on a video. I'll read that on a future edition of the show. Also over on the Talking SEC YouTube channel as well. You can always email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com or hit me up on social media at pjordansec. All right, everybody, what's up? And what we talked about, what was promised on the intro there. I am joined on this. It is Mystery Guest Wednesday here on Talking SEC, and I am joined by a good friend, long time guest on the show. We've done a lot of podcasts here and other places. Brandon Eisenman, Last Word on College Football. And Brandon, we're doing this live on Tuesday night. Of course, the audio version is coming on Wednesday morning, but I appreciate it, man, and I'm glad to have you on here with me.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back, Phil. I think it's been a while, so I'm glad to be back on with you.
So, who are you writing for about now on Last Word on College Football as while we do this? I see the LSU stuff you're wearing right now, but you were LSU, Florida State, back to LSU. Who are we writing for right now?
All right, so prior to the season starting, I started covering Florida State, and then I'm a diehard LSU fan. We all know that, but LSU's been fun lately, and so I reached out to our editors over at Last Word. I was like, hey, can I do some LSU stories here and there, like an as needed type of thing? They were like, sure. So I'm back covering LSU. Might not be on a weekly basis through the rest of the season, but every now and then you'll see a little bit of LSU stuff over there, along with my Florida State stuff too.
I was talking to a mutual friend of ours this morning, and I told him I was going to get you with that. So he'll be happy to hear about that. But anyways, so I got to thinking about this earlier today. Me and you, along with Mike Laval, our other colleague, Last Word of College Football, we did a live reaction last year of the first rankings. Now, we didn't do this thing live. This is recording after 9 o'clock Central Time, so the rankings are already out. But we know it's crunch time now. We are at that point where the rankings have come out. Which team I cover is nowhere near it, nowhere close to the rankings. But interesting, kicking things off with Tennessee number one. And I was on the Jay Stevens podcast a few hours ago before we recorded this show, and we talked about the rankings. They had just come out when when Jay hit the record button. Tennessee number one. Resume, I think, merits it. I was kind of surprised the committee did it, though.
I wasn't. I figured Tennessee would be number one in this week's playoff poll. And I know we'll get into the other top three teams around at the top four and the rest of the top 25 here. But when they unveiled the top six, I was a little shocked at a few of them. But going into the ranking show tonight, I figured Tennessee would be number one. I just had a feeling they would be.
Yeah, look, like I said, I thought the resume merited, but I was thinking, okay, we keep seeing in the other poll. Well, let's throw the coaches poll out. The AP poll, they kept going with Georgia number one, going with the defending champion. And I was worried would Georgia be awarded for what they did last year. Look, Georgia has had some struggles this year. Kent State, Missouri, look, they struggled for a half against Auburn. Some bad decision making by former Auburn head coach Brian Harsin, kind of equal to them 14 points in the second half. They took care of business. And then this past Saturday, I'll be honest with you, with Georgia, and Georgia sits at 3 in this thing, and we'll go through the top 10. I'm not going to go whole 25 with top 10 though. Georgia had some issues with Florida, jumps up 28-3. Georgia teams we know can't hold a 28-3 lead anyways. That's kind of against them. Then Florida has 17 points there. In the third quarter, they got Anthony Richardson running the ball a little bit more, but then Georgia pulled away, which Georgia helped them out with some turnovers. That's the thing. Georgia's had some more turnovers. So it's kind of like, we know Georgia's good. We know they're one of the best teams in the country, but I do think it's justified putting them at 3 because they have not played well at times. But again, should Ohio State be over them? Because who's Ohio State played? And I know the committee talked about tonight, and please go follow the Last Word on College Football Twitter handle because they had all the updates on what was being said coming out of the ranking show. Margin of victory. And yes, Ohio State has pretty much dominated everybody they played this year. They did struggle with Notre Dame in that first game. I don't know if I would put Ohio State over Georgia, though, because I think Georgia's beat some better teams than Ohio State. That's kind of an interesting thing there, too, with me, is kind of how they decided with Ohio State over Georgia. I don't agree there. I think Georgia should be ahead of Ohio State.
Yeah, I do agree with you there, Phillip. I do think Georgia should be ahead of Ohio State because, like you referenced a minute ago, who has Ohio State played? Really, aside from Notre Dame, really nobody. And I don't know their remaining schedule here in November, but obviously they still have to play Michigan final game of the regular season. But going back to Georgia and the reason that, just in my own opinion, I think they're not above Ohio State, even though both teams are undefeated, is like you said a few minutes ago about Georgia, is that they've struggled against some teams, against Missouri, against Auburn. Against Florida, they let Florida come back, and at one point, like you said, it was 28-3, and then it was all of a sudden it was 35-20, or 28-20 rather. Then Georgia went up 35-20 and kind of put it out of reach there. But I think the fact that the Dogs have struggled in a few games this year, and Ohio State really hadn't, is kind of the deciding factor there.
Yeah, and another thing on here. Okay, so we see Clemson at 4. And Michigan at 5. Now, when you look at Clemson, their resume does look better than Michigan because what Clemson the teams they beat, when you look at the rankings, they beat NC State when Devin Leary was healthy, and that's a big thing. They still had a healthy Devin Leary that one. They beat Wake Forest in a really, really good game and went to overtime, and then they barely escaped Syracuse, but Syracuse just got beat by Notre Dame. So now it kind of takes a shine off of them. And you got Michigan sitting at 5. Now, their non-conference schedule has hurt them. Now, they had UCLA originally on the schedule this year, but that game got pulled off. And also, I was seeing that the committee was talking about the reason why Ohio State's over Michigan is because Ohio State's margin of victory, once again, is big, and their explosive offense looking better, which Michigan's not built that way. They're kind of built like Georgia to a certain degree. They're not a really explosive offense. They're going to run the ball, play defense, and the quarterback's going to go off play action. But when I watch the two teams play, though, Brandon, and I get it, you add eye test / resume. But when I watch the two teams play, I don't think Clemson could beat Michigan. I think Michigan would beat Clemson. I think Clemson, they're going to probably go undefeated and win the ACC. But I think Michigan is more of a title contender than Clemson.
Yeah, I certainly do too. I think later on in the year, going into potentially the ACC championship game against North Carolina or whoever it's going to be, or in the playoffs, should Clemson be undefeated, they're a vulnerable team to lose. Especially on the offensive side of the ball. They've had struggles at quarterback. Now, Clemson's defense is pretty stout, but overall, eye test wise, and I've watched Michigan play a little bit this year too, and I've seen a lot of Clemson. I agree with you, Phillip. I think if these teams played, say, tomorrow, that Michigan would beat them, hands down.
Yeah, I just feel like if Clemson plays in the playoff, whoever they play first, and they're probably going to be the 4 team, they're going to be in trouble. It's not going to be a close game, I don't think. Look, you're right. Clemson's got a good front 4. their defense is good, and they're good at running the ball with Shipley. I mean, he is a tremendous player, both as a running back and even coming out of the backfield. But the quarterback situation is, I mean, DJ falls apart in big games, and then Cade Klubnik, he's a freshman. Is he ready for that moment? We don't know. But they don't have anybody left on their schedule, and the other side of the ACC is horrible. So I just don't feel like whoever Clemson, if they get in the playoffs, if they are that 4 team, they're not going to have much of a shot against whoever's number 1.
Yeah, no, certainly not. I just think if Clemson does make the playoff, it's going to take a lot, especially on the offensive side of the ball, for them to even have a slim chance to beat, a Tennessee, a Georgia, and Ohio State, whoever they play. Because right now, like you said, Will Shipley's good at running the ball. He's very good out of the out of the backfield catching the ball as well. But aside from that, what does Clemson really have as an offensive threat, in every single game so far this season that has made them look like a legitimate contender to upset somebody in the playoff? I haven't really seen it.
Yeah, then you look at the SEC, of course, SEC show. Alabama's number 6, and that doesn't make sense. That's where they're at in both of the regular polls, the AP poll and the coaches poll. 0 top 20 wins for this Alabama team, and I know they're ahead of TCU, who is undefeated. They do have 2 top 20 wins that the committee has talked about. They had to come from behind in some of them games. Which Alabama struggled with Texas and Texas A&M, which Texas is a solid Big 12 team. We know Texas A&M is not good. They're 3-5 at the moment with Mr. 8-4 football coach Jimbo Fisher, who gets paid like a national championship, multi-national championship coach. But we'll leave that my rant on that for another time. I've done that rant. People know how I feel about Jimbo Fisher. But interesting there are those comments. But I think the committee, look, it's the name on the jersey. It's Alabama. They think a lot about Alabama, and I think they think a lot about Bryce Young. So get that. And look, TCU is new to the party, and that's another thing. I mean, TCU, we haven't seen them in this position in recent years. So that's a lot to do it. But the committee likes Alabama. And honestly, why they like Alabama is why Tennessee is number 1. And also with their win there and their win against LSU. And, being high on Alabama seems, that is obvious from these rankings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. TCU fans, Big 12 fans, whoever could say, SEC bias, 3 teams in the top 6. No, not really. Look, TCU, to me, is a good team. But having to come from behind to beat a couple of top 20 teams just doesn't cut it for me. I fully agree with the committee here to put them behind one-loss Alabama at 7. I've seen enough from TCU to think that they might be a legit contender, but I just need to see them play a full 4 quarters not having to come from behind. Because if they get far behind enough, it's going to hurt them down the road.
Yeah, and I think too the Big 12's not getting a lot of respect either. That's got a lot to do with it too. If it's not Oklahoma and Texas, it is hard, I think, for a Big 12 team to really climb up there. And then with Oklahoma State taking their second loss, that didn't help. They was one of the favorites. Baylor has not lived up to expectations as well. It's just tough on the Big 12 overall right now. So now I'm going to skip 8-9 is 2 Pac-12 teams, Oregon and USC. But number 10 is LSU. Now I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, in the AP poll, they are in the coaches poll, they're like 15 and 17, in which they made jumps and they didn't even play this past in both polls. They jumped multiple spots, both polls, but LSU's number 10. And who would have thought after what happened against Florida State and then getting blown out by Tennessee? But I have said this, that game, LSU missed some opportunities. I know Tennessee had a big lead, 23-7 at halftime. Brian Kelly going for a couple 4th downs, which they were manageable 4th downs. You get those, you're in scoring position, or kick field goals is different. And then also the 4th and 10 toward the end of the first half. And then Jaden Daniels gets sacked. Tennessee gets a field goal range, kick a field goal 20-37. And obviously the opening kickoff, that was a fumble. A lot of things went against Tennessee in that first half. Hey, it happens. It's football. It's part of it. But I'm just saying those were big things that took a lot of momentum away from LSU. And then also playing in Baton Rouge at 11 o'clock didn't help as well. So I'm just going to say, I'm not making excuses for LSU. I'm just saying there was a lot of situations, a lot of things in that game that just, it was just a bad luck game for LSU, I think, in that first half. And then those are 2 losses, Florida State and against Tennessee. They've got to win against Mississippi State. They got the big win. I mean, they dominated Ole Miss. I mean, that was an impressive performance. They dominated on the offensive and defensive line in that game. Jaden Daniels in the running game overall is coming on. But anyways, were you surprised? What's your thoughts on LSU being number 10 in the initial college football playoff rankings?
It kind of worries me, honestly. I wasn't expecting them to be at 10. I knew they were at 15, I think, in the AP poll. And like you said, at 17 in the coaches poll this past Sunday, which now you can throw that out the door. It doesn't matter. But in the first playoff poll at 10, it really surprised me. Now, I'm looking at the rankings right here on my phone, so if you see me looking off, that's why. And Phillip, I kind of want to ask you this just for a brief second, just to get your opinion on it, and then I'll state mine. Is a 2-loss number 10 LSU team really better than a 2-loss Kansas State, a 2-loss Utah, and a 2-loss Penn State team? I mean, in my mind, I have my answer, but I kind of want to get your thought on that. I'm trying to see where the committee kind of saw the definitive answer to put LSU so high.
Well, the Utah thing, they have 2 losses.
Yeah.
But 1 loss is against Florida. A 4-4 Florida team that LSU marched up and down the field on. Now, I mean, Florida just scored 35 points, but LSU did what they wanted to offensively in that one. Penn State, they played a good 3 quarters against Ohio State, but then they imploded in the 4th quarter. And then also they were physically dominated against Michigan.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a good look. That was the big noon kickoff game and all that stuff. Who was the other team you mentioned?
Kansas State.
You got to look at that though too. What's the status of Adrian Martinez, quarterback?
Yeah.
There got to be. I would think they've taken that into consideration. What does your roster look like right now? Do you have a top 10 roster? I think that has a lot to do with it with Kansas State. So and honestly, just talent. I think LSU is more talented. There's just better. There's better players on their roster. So look at those 3 teams. That's kind of how I would look at it. Why LSU would be ranked ahead of them.
Yeah. Look, I agree with you 100%. I think LSU, talent-wise, is a better team. And then you look at LSU's win over Ole Miss, 2 weeks ago, and obviously that helps put them up there too. I'm just going to throw this out there, Phillip. Highest ranked 2-loss team currently. What that has to say in 3 or 4 weeks, we'll see. Saturday's approaching quickly, so LSU could be higher than 10 or a lot lower than 10 after Saturday, depending on what happens. But right now, LSU's the highest ranked 2-loss team. And look, I'm kind of excited. I think LSU's getting sneakily better with each game that goes along, aside from the Tennessee game. And even in that Tennessee game, Phillip, LSU just hurt themselves. The 4th downs, the muffed kickoff on the first kickoff of the game. And Tennessee's just good. So LSU did themselves in on that one, and that Florida State loss isn't really looking good either at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, special teams does like they're supposed to in that game. LSU beats Florida State. I mean, that's what happens there. Then you only have 1 loss. So now let's jump into it. Alabama and LSU's this Saturday. Now, everybody is obviously paying attention to the Georgia-Tennessee game, which is now that's interesting. And when we get done with this, I may have a couple thoughts on that, which is 3 versus 1, but reverse what we thought was going to be. This game is big because Alabama-LSU. Now, look, the SEC West isn't won this, especially if Alabama wins. If LSU wins, that is huge because now Alabama's got 2 losses. So now you will need LSU to lose 2 more times, and then they've already beat Ole Miss. So this game puts LSU in complete driver's seat to win the SEC West. Now, if Alabama wins, they still have to play at Ole Miss the following week, who has 1 loss, and they're off this week. So that is the scenario here. But now look at this game. Now I want the audience to listen to me when I say this. I'm not saying LSU is as good as Tennessee, that these players are exactly the same as the stars on Tennessee. But there are some similarities in the situation here. Tennessee had a mobile quarterback that was playing well throwing. Jaden Daniels is playing well. The last 2 games LSU's played, 11 touchdowns. He is a threat on the ground. He's LSU's leading rusher at over 500 yards. He's got 12 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's taking care of the ball. And also, they've got some good receivers on this LSU team. Now, Kayshon Boutte, it seems like he's getting a little bit more involved in the offense. I was starting to wonder if he was still on the roster at one point this season. But he has played well. Malik Neighbors has shown some things. Jenkins has shown some things at receiver. And defensively, they have the ability to get to the quarterback and cause Bryce Young problems. This game is on the road. Alabama in the last year and a half has had issues with this. Bryce Young has to put the Superman cape on. And I know Alabama fans are probably still freaking out about the 17 penalties against Tennessee. I'm going to say it again. I've said this, I feel like probably 5 or 6 times since the game, Brandon. You did the same thing against Texas. You had 15 penalties on the road there. You struggled at Jordan-Hare against Auburn last year. You almost got beat by Florida last year on the road, and you did lose A&M. So Alabama, to me, until they prove me otherwise, they're not the same team away from Bryant-Denny Stadium. This game has recipe for, and I'm not going to give my pick. Y'all know that'll be on Thursday when me and Matt Lowe pick all the games. But I just look at this game. It's got a lot of ingredients, like the Tennessee game did, for Alabama to potentially get upset. Now, they are favored. I think it opened up like they were favored like 13 points or so. But I think this is a close game, and it's got ingredients for Alabama to get upset. What are your thoughts going into Saturday night's game?
Phillip, there's a lot of them. First off, do I think Alabama commits, say 15 plus penalties in this game? Probably not. I think even though at Texas they had 15 and at Tennessee they had, the most in program history in a single game with 17, I feel like something is different or going to be different with Bama coming into this game, going into Baton Rouge at nighttime in Death Valley. I think Bama is going to be a more disciplined team. But like I said a minute ago, LSU's been sneakily getting better each week, aside from the Tennessee game. Even after the loss against Florida State, it took a couple of games, but LSU quietly started getting better. And then Tennessee rolled along and hammered them 40-13 or whatever that score was. I don't even want to remember that. And then they beat Ole Miss, and now they're playing to control their own destiny in the SEC West. And speaking of that, Phillip, if LSU does end up winning this game, they still have to get through at Arkansas and at Texas A&M. Now, I know A&M's not that good. They're not even going to go 8-4 this year, thankfully. Arkansas could be a trap game next week, I think, but they got to get through Bama first. But I think, like you said a minute ago, I do agree with you that LSU's got the playmakers on the defensive side of the ball to rattle Bryce Young in the pocket, make him have mistakes throwing the ball, maybe a fumble or two when he's trying to scramble out of the pocket. My biggest thing is on the defensive side for LSU is how well are they going to be able to attack Bama's rushing game? Because Jahmyr Gibbs is slowly getting better too, and I know a lot of Bama fans have bashed Jahmyr Gibbs, since the start of the season up until, the Mississippi State game or whatever. But to me, man, watching Jahmyr Gibbs play almost every week is like he's actually pretty decent running the ball. And I think that's a big test for LSU is how are they going to be able to contain him running the ball? If you stop Bryce Young, obviously they're going to hand it off to Jahmyr Gibbs and Jace McClellan. How is LSU going to counteract that on the defensive side of the ball?
I'll tell you what's an interesting storyline. I don't know how much, maybe it'll get talked about more. I'm sure during a broadcast it will. This is a big game for Brian Kelly. Not necessarily if LSU wins it, but we know his history at Notre Dame against Alabama. And he's going to throw the Clemson game in there as well. His teams got blown out in those games, and he got a lot of criticism for that. Now, I said this for the season. I think Brian Kelly's the third best coach in the SEC behind Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. his teams at Notre Dame were not as talented as the teams he has or will have at LSU. And we've already seen what he's done with them this year. This game needs to be close for Brian Kelly. He doesn't have to win this game, in my opinion, but it needs to be close. And if it is, I think a lot of people in this conference will start talking about Brian Kelly a little bit differently, the way I think they should, because like I said, I think he's the third best coach in this conference.
Yeah, I agree with you. And look, I don't like Brian Kelly's history against Nick Saban. He's what, 0-2 or 0-3. But to reference that in his time at Notre Dame, having to play against Saban a couple of times, the talent level is completely different now for Brian Kelly in Baton Rouge. They've got Jay Daniels transfer from Arizona State, who, look, I'll be honest, I bashed Jaden Daniels before the season. Like, when he transferred, I was like, there's no way that this kid's not going to start. He shouldn't start. But now I'm like, don't give anybody else the ball. Like, Jaden Daniels is doing his thing each and every week. And he's got LSU in prime position to take control of the SEC West in 3 or 4 days with a win over Alabama. But what Kelly has been able to do at LSU in his first year is remarkable, even with 2 losses. And yeah, if you lose to Bama close, that's fine. Just don't get blown out by 30 or 40, because that'll look bad. The fan base will probably they'll want you fired. Like, they may not want you fired, but they'll be heated if LSU was to get absolutely smoked in this game by more than 20. But I do think it's a close game. I think LSU's got pieces on each side of the ball to keep this a competitive game with Bama. Special teams is another major concern for LSU. But if they can keep that together, man, I think they can make this game, and I think it'll be close.
All right. So any score prediction overall?
All right, man. Look, last time Bama played a hostile SEC game on the road, I didn't expect Tennessee to win 52-49. And just as a casual college football fan, I cannot stand close games. Like, it irks me for some reason. I hate like 3-point games that come down to the last minute. Somebody's got to kick a field goal. I know LSU's a 2-score underdog here, but this is not out of bias or anything. I think LSU pulls the upset. I think they've got enough to do it. I think somewhere Bama's going to make a mistake or two, and that's going to give LSU momentum in the second half. And they're not going to put the game away per se. I do think it'll be close, but I think LSU finds a way to come out and win this game.
Okay, so we have a comment on YouTube. Somebody you're familiar with.
Oh, boy. Oh, Max. Max, hit me up after Saturday, bud. We'll talk about this game. I'd love to chat with you about it because, look, I think it'll be good. But those 2 words on the screen, I can't say those. My whole family is fans of that team in Tuscaloosa, and I didn't grow up that way, man. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Yeah.
So before we get out of here, and like I said, I'll give her my pick. That'll be on Thursday's podcast with me and Matt Lowe. So please make sure to check that out. It's always fun when Matt comes on the show. So as usual, we're going to do some SEC news. Now, usually, obviously, this is a solo segment. We're just recording this show all the way straight through. And just a few items. First up, and I didn't get to this on yesterday's pod because it was just going so long. We went 46 minutes on Tuesday's edition of the show. The SEC announced the TV schedule, for the 12th, for week 11. So they do not know. So we're going to have 3 11 o'clock games on the 12th, which I don't like because I'm usually watching 2 games at once. So and I know Brandon's not happy here. So we'll first go through the 11 o'clock games. Missouri, Tennessee, LSU, and Arkansas. They're 11 o'clock games. They have not decided which one will be on CBS and which one will be on ESPN. So we do not know that. And then Vanderbilt at Kentucky will be the 11 o'clock SEC game. Okay, that makes sense. Vanderbilt, I don't even know when the last time they did not have SEC network and went on network. But LSU, Arkansas. So I guess a lot of this is probably going to just dictate on who wins on Saturday. So honestly, either way, I would go with LSU, Arkansas on CBS because Tennessee is going to downright just annihilate Missouri in that game. But that's kind of what we got for 11 o'clock on the 12th.
Do I even have to get into this? I cannot stand 11 a.m. kickoffs, even if it's LSU and, an SEC opponent like Arkansas. I hate it. And I'll also say this about the LSU Arkansas game. I know you've said this. I agree with you on it. LSU Arkansas should always be after Thanksgiving, not 2 weeks before like it has been since, A&M came into the conference or whatever. I don't like this for next week. How do you go from giving LSU a 6 o'clock Central game against the number 6 team in the country to be like, oh yeah, even if you win, you got to go play in Fayetteville at 11 o'clock next Saturday? Like that, that's wrong. You don't do that. Put them at 2:30. But I think regardless of what happens here, Philip, I think LSU Arkansas should be the CBS 11 o'clock game. Missouri and Tennessee just doesn't deserve it to me. Tennessee's going to blow them out of the water.
Yeah. Now the 2:30 CBS game today is Alabama and Ole Miss, which
Okay, that's why then. Yeah.
that's the 2:30 CBS game. That makes perfect sense on that one. Oh, that means you're going to get Aaron Murray. No, he's not with CBS anymore. I don't know who will be the announced team for CBS at 11 o'clock. Who's the CBS B team?
That's a good question, Philip.
I think Neuheisel is part of it. I cannot remember who the play-by-play guy will
I
be.
don't remember who it is.
So I mean, so that's what's bad because at least Nick Neuheisel will only get him at halftime of these games. So we have to deal with him now for 3 hours in this one.
Yeah.
And look, if there wasn't a second CBS game, I think this would go primetime. But because you have 2 CBS games, they obviously want them to be good matchups to attract viewers. Now, when you look at the primetime games that day, you have Georgia at Mississippi State. We know what's going to happen there. And then Texas A&M and Auburn is the SEC Network game. So those are not exactly attractive matchups they'd have listed in primetime. So I can see why they want to put that game on at 11 and have it on CBS with those.
Yeah, I could see that. And Philip, I don't mean to take a personal shot at you because I know you cover Auburn, and I don't mean any ill will towards the Auburn fan base when I say this. But since you brought up A&M and Auburn next week, can they just put that game on Comedy Central next week? Because I mean, A&M's not good. Auburn, I mean, they might make a bowl, might not. Who knows? But primetime, you might could throw that one on at 11, and move LSU Arkansas to 6. That would have been better, I think.
We'll still go back to you want good matchups, good teams at 11 o'clock spot at CBS. So you're just going to have to wake up LSU, Brandon. I know it's hard for you. You're just going to have to wake up early that morning to watch LSU. Some other headlines, and this is big into this Saturday with the Tennessee-Georgia matchup. Georgia's going to be without linebacker Nolan Smith. He is out for the season with a torn pectoral muscle. He will undergo surgery on Thursday. In his career, he has 110 tackles, 20 tackles for loss, and 12 and a half sacks. Kirby Smart was asked this week who would replace. Now, if you look at the Georgia depth chart, MJ Sherman is listed as the backup, but he also said Robert Bill, Markham Jones Jr., or Ches Chambliss could be replacements for Nolan Smith. This is big because he's a big leader on this team, a lot of experience, a senior. He's been through all the battles. This is big. And going against a Tennessee offense that is clicking on all cylinders, and you need all hands on deck to slow that team down. So that is a huge, huge loss for this Georgia football team.
Yeah, that's definitely a big loss in Georgia's biggest game of the year. You really hate to see that happen for Georgia, but what is it going to say about Georgia? Playing Tennessee if Georgia still can defensively, get to Hendon Hooker and that Tennessee offense. I mean, now it's not going to say that Nolan Smith doesn't shouldn't be playing or whatever, or that they don't need him, but maybe the backups can step up for Georgia and pressure Hooker in the pocket and make this a little more of a contested battle than Tennessee thinks they're walking into.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting how they fill that role and how whoever fits that spot plays on Saturday. And then the last piece of news, some kind of more Auburn related stuff. Of course, talked about on Tuesday's podcast that Carnell Williams pretty much cleaning house with the staff, especially on the offense side of the ball. So especially you kind of wonder with Offensive coordinator Eric Cuso being relieved of his duties by Carnell Williams, who would be calling the plays. Well, first off, because Carnell Williams is the running backs coach, obviously he's not going to be doing that. Offensive analyst Jeff McDaniels will be helping with the running backs. Offensive line coach Will Friend will be the OC, but he will be assisted by wide receiver coach Ike Hilliard with the play calling and stuff like that. Analyst Kendall Simmons, former Auburn Tiger, will help out with the offensive line, since Will Friend will be doing that. Joe Bernardi will help with the tight ends. He was an offensive line assistant coach on the team. And analyst Mike Hartline, he will help coach quarterbacks. Some people were kind of wondering if he would call the plays. Well, he's going to step in and coach quarterbacks, because Kiso was also the quarterbacks coach. And also, speaking of the whole Auburn deal, we have a statement that was given out by Brian Harsin. I think it really would have been funny had he not just mentioned Auburn's name altogether, because they didn't mention his name in the press release and the statement. But here's what Brian Harsin had to say when it comes to his statement. I'm incredibly disappointed that I won't get to lead the Auburn football program and these players into the future. I poured my heart and soul into the program and team. We stood together in the face of considerable challenges and outside noise. Through my entire time at Auburn, we did things the right way, which is not always the easy way. I am very proud of the resolve shown by everyone in our facility and incredibly grateful for those at Auburn who stood by me and my family. I am certain this group of players will do great things. I will miss you tremendously, but will always be there for you and do anything I can to help you moving forward. Thank you for believing in me. Like any coach with the benefit of hindsight, there are things that I would have done differently. I don't pretend to be perfect, but I am certain I will be better moving forward because of this experience. I truly believe Auburn has the potential to be a championship program once again. The resources, financial support, fan base are in place. These are good people throughout the program and university. With complete alignment, the possibilities are endless. I hurt for the coaches, staff members, and families who are left in limbo. This team and staff came here fully committed to our vision and what we could accomplish in time. That time has been cut short. They will all persevere because of their tremendous character and ability, and I'll do everything I can to help them with this transition. As is life, my family and I will now turn the page and chart our next course. Always grateful for the positive relationships formed and memories made on the plains. Thank you for allowing us to be part of the Auburn family. So that is what Brian Harsin released on his statement. Very humble, very classy, I guess say, which I have a feeling something down the road is going to happen. He is going to really unload on what happened at Auburn. There will be a tell-all at some point. It's a basic statement. But, Brandon, as we close up the show, I've given my thoughts. I had Coach Max Howell on yesterday. We talked about this a lot. Just from an outsider's point of view, not an Auburn fan, not a person, involved with Auburn, what were your takeaways, your thoughts from what happened on Monday?
I was kind of shocked that they did it on a Monday. I really thought they would wait until the end of the year, or if they were going to do it during the season, why not do it on the bye week a few weeks ago? But look, we all knew at some point in 2022 that it was coming, whether it be during the football season or right after. We knew Harsin was going to be let go. He just really didn't fit the mold at Auburn. What was he, 9-12? I think was his record there. Yeah, 9-12. To me, he wasn't the right fit from the very get-go. Obviously, that was apparent with, from what I've heard, the only person that really wanted him there was former athletic director, what's his name, Alan Green, I think.
Yeah.
He was the only guy that wanted him there. So that's really saying a lot. But aside from Harsin, to give the interim to Cadillac Williams, that's huge. I kind of like that.
That's a guy that the Auburn fans aren't going to hate. That's a guarantee.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And look, if Auburn can turn the page here and maybe go 2-2 in their last four, what would they get you at, 6-6?
They'd have to go 3-1. They're 3-1. 3-5.
3-5. That's right. Yeah. That means you probably got to beat Alabama. We'll see. But look, having Cadillac as the interim is good. But you kind of hurt me a little bit ago when you were talking about the new assistant coaches that are going to be under Cadillac for the rest of the season, because with him not calling, not being the running backs coach anymore and not calling the plays, they can't run Tank Bigsby every play.
There may be a memo put out. Whoever's offensive coordinator, the running backs are going to get the ball 50 times on Saturday.
50 times. Hey, I'd like to see it, honestly. But yeah, I knew it was coming for Auburn. But like I said, I was shocked that it happened on Monday. Could have even done it on Sunday, really. But we knew it was coming. He wasn't the right fit, and the coaching search has already begun. And I know that rumors are going to start swirling if they already haven't. And it's going to be wild to see who Auburn gets. I'm excited to see it, but I really want to see how Cadillac Williams does with him and the coaching staff here down the stretch in November.
It's going to be big because for him, it's big too, because if he's impressive, he's not going to be the coach full time. They're not going to take the inner tag off of him, but it could really get some eyeballs on him for some other programs, seeing what he can do in that leadership position. Well, Brandon, I think we have covered it all here on this Wednesday edition of Talking SEC, but airing here on a Tuesday night here on my YouTube channel. If listeners, viewers wanted to check you out, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Heisman Eisman. You can also follow all my work over at Last Word on College Football, Florida State, and every now and then LSU. And starting back on Wednesday, if you're listening to this, actually Thursday, sorry, my bad. Thursday, LSU Breakdown is making its return for sure. I promise. Big game this week with Bama. I've got to do a podcast before I head to Orlando for the weekend. But big game. I'm excited to not only to bring the podcast back, to kind of be sparsely writing about LSU again, and for the game this weekend. So, go if you have anything that if I had a bad take on here, go hit me up at Heisman. Let's argue about it.
All right, everybody. Of course, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. You can listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You can watch the show over on YouTube at the Phillip Jordan YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all the notifications, and if you leave a comment on the video, I'll read that on a future edition of the show. And you can also email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. We'll be back tomorrow to close out the week with Matt Lowe. We'll be picking every single one of the SEC games for this weekend. So I hope you guys will check it out. Hope you have a great Wednesday. And you've been listening to Talking SEC.
Thank you for listening to Talkin' SEC. Follow Phillip on social media at PJordanSEC and the show at Talkin' SEC Pod. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time when we're talking SEC.